These are my favorite metal albums of January 2025, and we're starting with The Halo Effect with The March of the Unheard. Now, I've been a little lukewarm with the last two Dark Tranquillity records, despite that being one of my all-time favorite bands, but where those have just been solid, this union of members of both that and In Flames has so far yet to let me down. You really do get the best of both worlds on this sophomore effort. Those unmistakable classic In Flames riffs, the lush atmosphere of the Dark Tranquillity synths, and of course, Michael's always powerful vocals.
The absence is everywhere.
Lots of great tracks to get their hooks in you here, my personal favorites being Detonate, Our Channel to the Darkness, What We Become, and March of the Unheard. If I'm being honest, I prefer the debut overall, but there's really not a moment of this follow-up that I feel compelled to skip, so consider this an A tier to that one's S. Next up is Mutagenic Host with The Diseased Machine. Kicking off another year of more traditional death metal with this doozy of a debut from the London-based death metal quintet. Very much in line with albums like Morbid Angel's Domination, it's a simple yet sickening slice of slime-ridden groove backed by some strong production to emphasize its dark, cavernous qualities. I'll admit that at first I was wondering if this was just another generic slab of old school flavor, but something compelled me to continue on, and the deeper I went, the more I felt subsumed by its murky, hypnotic power. Another fresh face to add to the growing wave of modern bands in the classic style, recommended to fans of Frozen Soul and Necrot in particular. Then there's Patriarkh with Prophet Elijah. Formerly one of the Batushkas after the often memed split between members, this Polish band follows up their debut, now under a new name but with the same haunting sound. Their folk-infused take on black metal brings monk-like chanting along with a number of traditional instruments in the tegelharpa, mandolin, mondocello, hurdy-gurdy, and stringed dulcimer, and all in service of telling the true story of Elias Kilmowicz, known as Prophet Elijah to the Orthodox Grzybowski sect. And it's not all pure atmosphere either, with tracks that also bring the riffs with the sort of Rotting Christ-sounding closing track. Honestly, I'd kind of fallen off of caring about this project when all the drama went down, but this was enough to get me more than interested again. Then we have Burn Down Eden with Dismal Epiphany. Album 4 from this solid German melodic death metal band formed in 2012. In addition to the great classic riffing and all-around engaging songwriting, they've had music videos for nearly every song leading up to this album that also showcases an emphasis on fun and sense of humor. When it comes down to it though, what matters is whether the music is good, and these guys are definitely cooking up all the best elements of my favorite genre. I do think that the vocals could have a little bit more presence and the songs could have a little bit more unique personality, but those nitpicks aside, Gothenburg Melodeath fans should love this. Then we have Estuarine with Corporeal Furnace. I got into this project with 2018's Sick Erit Scriptum, and even though I don't feel like I even fully understand what they were doing back then, I still named it one of my favorite albums of that year. Fast forward 2 equally impressive EPs and an interview with Mastermind Hydra later, and the music only gets better and better. Not to mention my deep dive into 90s and 2000s death metal really helped to make further sense of the madness with my exposure to the likes of Lycathia Flame, Mithras, and Toe. My original write-up referred to the music as avant-garde, technical, progressive, blackened, psychedelic death grind, and I think that still sums it up pretty well. I also agree with Hydra calling this album faster, heavier, and less conventional than ever before, and its most boundary-pushing iteration to date. Then we have Synaptic with Enter the Void. Despite originally forming in the 2000s, this is the German band's first full length, and I am so glad that someone recommended to me in the comments. This is technical and progressive death metal to the nth degree, with guitars and also bass that will give you damn motion sickness. Their approach reminds me of other bands like Gorod, Obscura, and the Zenith Passage, with maybe just a touch of BT Bam in there as well. Again, if I'm nitpicking, I feel like the few moments with clean vocals lack the same quality as everything else, but outside of that, this is a 34-minute headbanging powerhouse. Next up is Slaughtersun with Black Marrow. Featuring Ben Karras of Thank You Scientist and Windfarer, this New Jersey band sounds very much like Lamb of God in their prime. They bring that same level of equal parts groove and aggression, uniting influences from thrash and death metal that gets me banging my head like the first time I heard 11th Hour in high school. Relentless Thelemic and Black Marrow in particular are just about as good as you can get in this genre, though I also like the more dark methodical energy of Ready Cell Awaits, calling back to the likes of Omerta. The production could use a little bit more work, but everything else makes me very excited at the prospect of a full length in the future. Next up is Faithxtractor with Loathing and the Noose. The fifth album from this Ohio death metal duo formed in 2005 and absolutely making the most of this trim 38-minute runtime. Such a great traversing of pacing here, from chaotic technical speed to primitive man-esque extreme doom, sometimes all in one track as with Flooded Tombs. The sudden changes in style and tone on this album surprised me more than once, and that made the listen all that more engaging. Rare for a death metal album to turn my head like that these days, so props for that alone. Then we have the much anticipated Harakiri for the Sky with Scorched Earth. Now, while I definitely still have my usual qualms when it comes to the runtime and some of the more repetitious elements, I'd say that with this 8th album, the Austrian band continues to prove why they are one of the bigger names in atmospheric black metal. I really appreciate that in spite of the emphasis on overall vibes, the riffs never get lost in the sauce, offering an experience that's also often comparable to the likes of Insomnium, and With Autumn I Surrender even gives me faint hints of The Cure. Yeah, I'd say alongside the sadly now defunct Numenorian as well as modern powerhouse Mol, Harakiri for the Sky know how to actually write consistently engaging music with hooks and where each song is differentiated from the last. It could be tightened up a bit, and I'd love to particularly hear more variety in the vocals, but great stuff overall. Next up is Great American Ghost with Tragedy of the Commons. Another one of those highly underrated metallic hardcore groups that I have been following for years now, and I'm frustrated are not as big as the likes of Knocked Loose, because they are every bit as good. I've been on the train since 2015's Sardonic Everyone Leaves, and right from Kerosene, they have only seemed to become more pissed and full of vinegar with time with some of these vocal lines. But they've also evolved their more melodic elements, as on tracks like the kind of architect-sounding Lost in the Outline. Personally, I could have done with a bit more of the former and less of the latter, but across the board they use both here to craft an impressively bleak atmosphere, and I also appreciate the vaguely industrial elements that they bring to the music that further add to the cold concrete and steel aesthetic. Then we have Sarcator with Swarming Angels and Flies. Definitely have some mixed feelings about album 3 from this Swedish band. Y'all know I love me some Blackened thrash, and when they bring the energy as with Come at the End Times and The Undercurrent, I am 100% on board. But then we also get some experimentation deeper in that I'm on the fence about.
We're lost in the treasure is gone. Long lost in the treasure is gone.
Don't get me wrong, I like to hear bands shake things up rather than just paint by numbers, and some of this is pretty interesting here, but the overall execution feels inconsistent with the runtime showing some bloat as on the times tedious 7 minutes of Where the Void Begins. Worth the listen, and as always, your mileage may vary, but this was more of a 7 out of 10 for me. Then we have Paleface Swiss with Cursed. Paleface is what you get when you cross metallic hardcore a la Kubla Khan with Slipknot's self-titled debut. Hatred sounds like it could have been ripped directly from that album with the riffs and guitar tone to the pingy snare and Zelly's unhinged gasps for air. And really, his vocal performance is a highlight of much of this album.
My blood's on your fucking hands!
The melodic parts are a bit more hit and miss, but the heavy stuff repeatedly compels me to break anything in sight that isn't bolted down. Love those tasty grooves alongside these syncopated screams. Even the kind of horrorcore sounding rap on Enough ends up working pretty well for me, miles better than anything Ronnie Radke has attempted. Then we have Stick to Your Guns with Keep Planting Flowers.
The bed we share gives me the life, but we turn on each other like dogs in a fight.
The Orange County crew really brings it on this one with 24 minutes of pure classic metalcore with both hard-hitting verses and catchy choruses right out of, again, Architect's prime. Plenty of headbang-inducing hardcore energy in the chuggy parts and D-beats, but also with tons of genuine emotion that comes off as anthemic as opposed to cheesy.
When will it be enough for you savages? It's getting hard to tell.
Seriously, with so much crappy octane core out there, I can't say how nice it is when I hear a band actually effectively pull off both sides of that equation. Maybe some will still find parts like the title track corny, but I found them very touching. Then we have Mirar with Ascension. I saw a lot of recommendations in the comments for this French deathcore crew when it dropped on the 1st. Riffs feel like a cross between Frontier and Viljarta with a touch of Darko, but often combined with massive layers of synth atmosphere a la Shadow of Intent. I'm a little curious as to why this is classified as deathcore to begin with, as the music is instrumental, and to me the vocals are kind of a key trait of that genre. But nomenclature aside, this is some very cool music that I like to throw on in the background while working on other projects. Then we have the Great Old Ones with Kadath. Album 5 for this French band, and I think this one takes the cake for me this month as far as black metal goes. They bring so much drama and sense of scope to their sound that puts them well above the competition here, not to mention the dynamic range and more progressive approach to the songwriting makes for a far more engaging and often unpredictable runtime. Over an hour is a lot to ask of your average listener, but this is another case where, due to everything I just mentioned, it never drags or becomes tedious. There is always something new on the horizon to look forward to, and the performances make the journey well worth it. Before I get to my favorite of the month, a few honorable mentions here. We have Flummox with Southern Progress. I was really excited to listen to this one, but I just haven't had the opportunity yet as of the time of this recording, but there's so much like diversity and kind of weirdness on display here. Some might argue whether this is like fully metal or not, but it gets pretty darn heavy. There are some parts that remind me of like Every Time I Die, so yeah, looking forward to hearing this in full. Also, August Burns Red with the Thrill Seeker re-recording. I mean, I didn't have a lot to say about this beyond like, yeah, I love August Burns Red. I love all their albums, and this is a re-recording with their longtime vocalist instead of their previous vocalist as with the original version, and yeah, it rips. As for worst albums of the month, there's not really anything that came out that I felt like I really needed to kind of tear into. There was some stuff that was sort of like okay, which is why I've expanded the scope of this segment in general so that I can talk about things like that as well. I will say you'll have to wait for my All That Remains tier list for my thoughts on Anti-Fragile though, as at the time of this recording, that's another one I have not yet heard all the way through, but the singles do not fill me with confidence, so we will see. Also, do comment below your favorite and least favorite metal albums in the month, whether they line up with mine or you completely disagree. Let's get a discussion going. But my favorite album of the month goes to Fleshsport with Painted Paradise. Now, I fully expected the Halo effect to take the top slot here after listening to that, but then this Indiana band swooped in to absolutely destroy everything else on this list. I liked their debut, Ember's Gathering, but this follow-up blows that out of the water in every possible way. Fans of bands like Archspire, Exocrine, and Surreption in particular are going to love this. The guitars are just so much fun in their chaos, and the rapid-fire vocals never fail to put a smirk on my face. This already sets a really high bar for tech death in 2025, and I hope other bands are up to the challenge, because this already makes a strong case to stick in my brain all the way to December. Y'all, if you missed anything from last year, check out this playlist from 2024, or you can check this out for your personal YouTube recommendation. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.